Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the first session of Connect University Autumn School on secure and sustainable digital infrastructures. I'm Alex, and I'll be your host for the entire week. And today, merely warming everyone up for the main topic, challenges of sustainable digital infrastructure. Now, we started back in 2015 with Connect University, which is the knowledge sharing flagship initiative of DigiConnect, which aims to update both the EU staff and you, the general public, about the latest digital trends, as well as important digital policies. The scope of our sessions in general is to put at the same table EU institutions, industry, academia, and international organizations, helping us find inspiration from each other, identify current opportunities and threats to policymaking. For those of you who are not yet connected via Slido, we invite you to do so using the hashtag digital infrastructures. I say this because there you can ask questions and I will make sure that they make their way towards the speakers. Also, we encourage you in general for this week to use the hashtag Connect University as well as digital infrastructures when sharing any insights on the event on social media. Now, the recording of all sessions will be available as of next week, and the links will be added in the chat, but please feel free to visit the Digital EU channel on YouTube. And at any time, you can find all the Connect University recordings yourself at the Connect University webpage on Futurium, where we have a dedicated space with all the videos. Now, generally speaking, technology moves pretty fast, so we must run alongside with it, having access to the most up-to-date information so we can reach our destinations in good shape. Before we start the core session of today, I want to give you one small overview of what else you might expect this week for future destinations. So today, from 2 o'clock, we will have the session on gigabit coverage by land, sea, and air, hosted by Ms. Rita Weizenbeek, Director of Connectivity in DigiConnect at the European Commission. If you are curious to understand the current landscape in terms of gigabit coverage, we will go through political aspects as well as connectivity targets, financial instruments and investments connectivity, more technical approach. We will go in satellite internet, the main challenges in Europe, undersea cabling, the latest developments of submarine infrastructure, connectivity by land, which will be telecom operators and the latest connectivity regulation that they face. Tomorrow, Tuesday, from 10 o'clock, we will continue with an overview of the microchips value chain. The session will be hosted by the Director A in DigiConnect, which is Lucilla Scioli, the Director on Artificial Intelligence and Digital Industry. We will go through understanding better the semiconductor value chain, the different segments that it has and its global nature and challenges, the importance of research, innovation, as well as skills in the sector, and the need for public policy intervention, including the EU Chips Act. After that, at 2 o'clock, just as a reminder, all sessions start from 10 and 2 each day. So after that, from 2 o'clock, we will end the day with the shift to edge data processing session. This will be hosted by Pierre Chastanet, the head of unit in DigiConnect on cloud and software. And the aim is to go through more of a strategic level regarding edge computing, the strategies in development, the techniques, the foreseen advances which are coming up, beyond the commercial products that each organization has in place. We will give the operator perspective in the matter, including the vision on the role of edge computing for telco operators, as well as the general strategy in terms of system integration. On Wednesday, we will start with the session on data centers, hosted by Manuel Mateo Goye, our Deputy Head of Unit in DigiConnect on Cloud and Software. As to what you might expect in that session, we will go and speak about operator engagement with the community, the negotiation of what's called the social contract, the citizen appreciation of data infrastructure in general, which techniques data infrastructure and cloud operators are deploying, what is the effect of new data processing at the edge, and the policies that the Commission is putting forward towards greening targets. After that, at 2 o'clock, we will start the Web 2 versus Web 3 session towards the next generation internet, hosted by Gemma Carolia, the acting head of unit in next generation internet in DigiConnect. In terms of topics, we will go through the EU vision for the future internet and the technology building blocks behind the Internet of Humans, the political challenges brought on by Web 3 and the current solutions for those of Web 2, the status quo of Web 2, exploration and alternative definitions of what Web 4 or Web 5 might actually mean, social economic potentials and threats of Web 3 and applications, privacy and data protection challenges in the upcoming Web 3, and tokenization in general and tokenization of sustainable agriculture. Thursday, we'll start the day on a more technical, complex subject, high-performance computing and quantum infrastructure, deployment in Europe, hosted by Oscar Diaz, our head of sector on quantum technologies. And we will have roughly 4 or 5 real cases on petascale, pre-SL, high-performance computing deployment, quantum deployment, and a real case of quantum computer deployment. In 2 o'clock on Thursday, we will continue with industrial platforms, hosted by Max Lemke, head of unit of Internet of Things. As to what you might expect, we will be able to see industrial practices on apps on platforms, reflections on policy, innovation, and deployment perspective of emerging IoT platforms, as well as edge infrastructure economy, working examples of industrial platforms, and governance scheme for accelerated investments in the area. Finally, on Friday, the session on mobile generations from 1G to 5G will be hosted by Peter Stuckmann, our head of unit on future connectivity systems. We will go through 5G in the digital decade, investment needs, and security aspects, different generations of mobile communications, including the plans for 6G and the coexistence, transition, and compatibility, connected and automated mobility, autonomous connected vehicles or self-driving cars, and a few other precise and use cases such as emergency services or business critical industries processes such as automated manufacturing. And lastly, we will end the entire week with a closing session, EU digital infrastructure in global ecosystem, hosted by Roberto Viola, the Director General of DigiConnect. The session will recap the most important takeaways of the week. We will take more of a holistic view of the Autumn School topics and their relation to policy. And we will end with EU Commission's plans and concerns for the future in terms of greening digital infrastructures. As for our session of today, which opens up the entire week of the Autumn School, in order to best give you a comprehensive context on the topic for non-experts such as I, as well as those of you which are a bit more fluid in the matter, we have with us today Thibaut Kleiner, Director D in DigiConnect, Policy Strategy and Outreach. Just as a short bio of what Thibaut has been doing in the last years, in September 2011, he moved to the digital policy area as advisor of Vice President Nelly Cruz in challenge of the digital agenda and supervised internet policies at large, such as internet governance, cybersecurity, cloud, and data. From 2014 to June 2016, he was head of unit in charge of network technologies on 5G and the Internet of Things in DigiConnect. After being in charge in budget and HR, Thibaut then came back today to DigiConnect to the head of unit in charge of research strategy and coordination. So without further ado, Thibaut, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you and welcome to this autumn session of Connect University. So indeed today, my name is Thibaut Kleiner, the Director of Policy Strategy and Outreach in DG Connect, and I wanted to give you a first introduction to our plan for this decade, what we call, or rather our President, Ursula von der Leyen, has called the digital decade until 2030. She also said that digital technologies is a make or break, which shows really the importance of where we stand today. And in fact, I think we all experienced recently with the confinement linked to the COVID pandemic, with also the situation currently experienced, that scarcity is back in the world, and that in the digital sector, we have learned that we need also sometimes to rely on other regions, and that there are risks if we are not able in the EU to also stand on our feet and to have our own capabilities in the digital area. Digital is too important. We need also to develop our own infrastructures, our own technologies in the EU, and to make them fit also with our values and with our vision. And in fact, that's very much what our plan is for the digital decade, this European way, something we have described really with our digital compass for 2030. And our vision is very clear. What we want is to make sure that we have in Europe the ability to explain what we are doing on the basis of our principles, digital rights that we set for our citizens, and also a clear vision as to what we want to do with these digital technologies. In the EU, we believe that the technology is there to serve the people, that all these technologies have a purpose to make the world a better place, if I may say so, to give opportunities to individuals, and to make sure that we include everyone in this digital transformation. This is very much our European vision, a transformation that is empowering people, that is inclusive, that is also bringing prosperity to our businesses, and last but not least, that is also sustainable, that integrates also this green agenda. And the way we have designed our rules over the past 10, 20 years actually, is in fact based very much on these ideas. And that's what you see on this pyramid, really, that on top of it, we have our values, what we believe is needed for the future. And this is derived into our democratic principle, this idea of freedom of choice, that you should as individual decide for yourself. It shouldn't be artificial intelligence, robots, or platforms that decide for you what kind of product you want or what you want to see in terms of news on your screen. We also want to make sure that in Europe, there is safety and security online. It is not the case that there are different rules online. Online and offline rules apply. And that's why we've devised important legislation in the past month, just recently adopted the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act, that are trying really to put some clarity in the way online platforms should operate, empowering people and not preventing competition. But these rules that we have designed in a number of areas in the EU, from media freedom and pluralism that was recently put forward, so that also we have the possibility in online media to have not only freedom of speech, but also the right kind of choice that we want, is also linked to a number of various initiatives, legislative initiatives we've made that all contribute to these values, these principles, this democratic underpinning of our actions. From artificial intelligence to data, we want to make sure that the digital transformation will bring these benefits. And this brings me to the topic of the autumn session, the technologies. Because it's wrong to believe that technologies are value agnostic. Technologies carry with them also some principles, some views of how society should work. And that's why in the EU, we believe that it is important to design these technologies with our values, with our democratic principles in mind, so that when you design a new AI system, it will not go against human rights. When you design a new Internet of Things device, connected device, it will not undermine your privacy. When you have this new microelectronic chips, they will have cybersecurity at heart. So that's very much the European way, making the best of the digital transformation, but at the same time, making sure that as EU, we are really active and making sure that we are really not only consuming technologies, but also developing them and making sure that they serve our important development in terms of growth, in terms of sustainability, in terms of inclusion. And that's what we set in the digital decade in terms of our compass for 2030. In this compass, we basically set to ourselves as EU some clear targets. And in this compass, we try to find a number of indicators that we want to meet by 2030, which we felt were somehow essentials for this digital transformation. We believe that if we reach these goals, we will be on a very good path to achieving this vision. And in this compass, we have 4 cardinal points, of course. And the first one, very important on top, is of course skills. Without the human talents, we are nowhere also in the digital sphere. And that's what we want also to achieve here, making sure that we have not only basic digital skills for everyone. So we have a target very ambitious of more than 80% of the total population. And this includes really elderly people that we want to also make sure benefit from this digital transformation. But we have also specialists, because specialists are what we need really for the businesses, for the advanced technologies here. 20 million. And we want more women in this, because women are really the key as well to increase the number of specialists in the EU working with these digital technologies. The second cardinal point is the transformation of business. We want to make sure that this digital transformation is here as well for every company, small and large. We want 70% of all EU companies to use cloud, artificial intelligence, or big data, because we believe that this will be the basic technologies for the future. We want also to make sure that government transforms itself and that it's fully digitalized, that it offers new services in the areas of public service, of health in particular. And very often the key for this will be to have online digital identity. So this is really an important target for us. We want citizens to have access to that digital identity and to be able to really use it to identify themselves online in a way that is more private, where you don't need to say everything about you, not to fill thousands of forms, but rather give only what is needed to access the service you want. Which brings me to the topic of the day, infrastructures, essential for our digital decade, essential to reach our sovereignty in terms of this digital transformation, essential to also deliver services to citizens and to empower businesses to make the best out of these digital opportunities. And here you will hear more during the week about these infrastructure targets, starting with connectivity, where we want here gigabit connectivity for everyone. So it means really 5G everywhere. It means also deploying cables across the EU so that everyone has access to the internet with high speed, because that's really the key to unfold many of these digital opportunities. Then we want to make sure that we also in Europe produce more semiconductors. We've witnessed in the past year the problems of not having enough semiconductors produced in Europe. Plants had to shut down because they didn't have the microchips they needed. We have seen people having to use microchips for different purposes because they couldn't have enough in medical devices or machines. In a situation of war in Ukraine, this is something that is also a problem going on. So we want to make sure that in the EU, we produce more of these chips, more of these cutting edge chips. That's why we've made proposals in terms of a Chips Act. And that's why we want to reach 20% of the global production in the EU, so double our market share in this sector. Data, edge, and cloud, that's the next revolution, really. Today we have hyperscaler, as we call them, huge data centers that serve cloud services. We believe in the future, if more applications like the metaverse or elements linked with precision medicine and the like, or even connected devices have to flourish, they will need data closer to them. And that's why we believe that data edge and cloud is really something where EU can regain some benefits, some advantage. We have a very ambitious target of 10,000 climate neutral and highly secure edge nodes, because also we believe that through this new technology, we can consume less energy for our data and for our infrastructure. Extremely important for the future. When you know that Bitcoin also there is consuming as much electricity as the whole of Switzerland, it tells you how important it is to invest in this new data infrastructure. And the last target for infrastructure is also on computing. We want Europe to lead, to have the first computer with quantum acceleration available very, very, very soon, actually in a few years' time, before 2030. So that's really our digital compass, which is really leading us in this transformation. But the second pillar, not least important, is also that we want these infrastructures, the digital transformation, to fit with our identity as Europeans, with our EU digital rights and principles that we've put forward. And here really is somehow our credentials. We want to commit so that all our citizens, all the people living in Europe can expect to get these benefits everywhere in the way we design our policies, in the way we support digital technologies. And at the core is this idea that people are at the center. Digital technologies are there to serve our benefits, to protect our rights, to support our democracy, not the other way around. And that's why, EU is promoting these values also across the world. We believe that this is something that is really important to make sure that we gain more following, and that when we talk to companies in Silicon Valley, they will also develop the technology thinking about these values that we care about, and they also start to be convinced about. In the EU, we want solidarity and inclusion. Technology are not there to create new divides between people, between regions. So we want really to make sure that there is this solidarity, this inclusion of everyone, that everyone has the skills, as we discussed, but also that they can access digital public services and have also fair working conditions, extremely important. Third element in our digital rights and principles, we want freedom of choice. We want to make sure that the online environment is not a place for dystopia, a place where you are being controlled without noticing. We want a place for the digital transformation where you feel safe, where you feel also that you are protected somehow, and that you can interact with technologies without being afraid. And that brings us to participation. We want also to make sure that democracy is important and that you have the opportunity to use this online media for freedom of expression, for democratic discussions, that you control what people are doing with your data. Fifth element is safety and security. Not much to say, but that especially children should be protected online, but all of us, we are entitled to a safe and secure digital environment. And sustainability is also part of this EU vision. The fact that we need the digital devices also to support the green transition, to be reusable and not to generate waste, but also to think about, by design, energy consumption and make sure that we have technologies that will in fact reduce our global environmental footprint, and they can do this very effectively. So that's the second leg of our vision, the digital rights and principles, and we want these to be totally included in the way we design this digital transformation. And they are underpinned actually by a series of regulatory initiatives. I won't go through all of them, but these principles are really at the heart of how we've designed our regulatory initiatives. And with this, you see that we have a complete list to make sure that really it's not just about words, it's about really having the legislation that will deliver on these principles and that will make sure that citizens can embrace this digital transformation, because it's an opportunity, not a threat, an opportunity. From data to cybersecurity, to media, to connectivity, to AI, we have all the elements now in place. And that's why we can focus on accelerating this digital transformation, generate growth, and making sure that through our policy program that we've recently adopted, we also have a story that brings all our member states together. Just to recall that in the plans we've put forward with member states, these recovery plans after the COVID crisis, more than 20% of all the expenses, of all the investments have to go to digital infrastructures and technologies. This is a considerable amount. It's almost something like 130 billion euros that are being invested right now across the EU. And this is a huge opportunity that we want to bring forward until 2030 with this idea that with our compass, we have targets not only for the EU, but actually for all of us, because we will not reach these targets unless the member states also contribute and go in this same direction, in the same journey together. So as European Commission, we will make sure that we monitor and that we report every year about this project, about this progress towards our digital compass in 2030. So a report, a State of the Digital Decade report. We will look at what works fine from our legislation, our program for investment, our links with industry. We will also make sure that we look at what does not work and make sure also that in that process, we will listen to citizens, to businesses that will be able to comment to this. We will listen to the European Parliament, to the European Council, to the member states, and make sure that together we design the right measures that may be needed in case insufficient progress or deviations from the trajectories are identified. Very important, we want also to make sure that we will pool investments, because the digital economy is all about scale. And it's very often when we join forces as Europeans that we can lead. We see this currently, for instance, for high performance computing, supercomputers. Europe 5 years ago was really going in the wrong direction. We didn't have any of the leading supercomputers. We joined forces, we pooled our investments together, and now we are opening actually in Germany the most powerful, one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful supercomputer in the whole world. That's exactly what happens when we pool our efforts, when we work together through these multi-country projects, by making sure it's not just a one member state story, but it's several member states that pool their efforts and that can deliver these leading cutting edge digital results. And we have this currently, for instance, pan-European deployment of 5G corridors linking countries, but also element around quantum, very closely associated to the compass, as we discussed, but also in terms of digital innovation hubs, one hub in every region in the EU that are all part of a network, so that when you need the best expert, it may be next door in your home region, but you can find it elsewhere through this network in Europe. So multi-country projects, having a team approach with all European member states is really our key for success in the digital decade. With this, now I wanted to deep a little bit deeper in looking at some digital infrastructures and also trying to leave some time for question and answers. So I went through the compass indeed, but digital infrastructures are one of the 4 cardinal points. And here the idea is really that we need to invest, we need to have also an inclusive access to these digital infrastructures to fit with our values, with our digital principles I was describing. But also this is essential, of course, for our global competitiveness, and especially for SMEs. Digital infrastructures, we believe, also are essential to bring more digital innovation. And that's why we have, in terms of connectivity, this target of gigabit for everyone, so fast, reliable, and secure internet connections for people and business. Without connectivity these days, you're not able to access the best opportunities, the best innovations. So that's a must for the EU, and you'll hear more about this from my colleague this afternoon, I believe. Another element already flagged is really on cutting-edge sustainable semiconductors. Semiconductors, the silicon basically, is at the heart of everything we do in digital. These are the microchips that you find everywhere, in any connected device, in your computer, in your car, everywhere basically these days where you have digital, you have a chip. And we need to produce more in Europe, because otherwise, if it's all imported and we have disruptions due to war, due to some pandemic or anything like this, we see the problems and we see the risks also for our own economic and digital sovereignty. In terms of digital infrastructures, indeed, we want to make better for data edge cloud, I already described it, and also in terms of quantum computing, really, this is the future of computing, and you'll hear more about that from also my colleague. So how do we do that in terms of connectivity? So really, the challenge is to make sure that we have not only access for a few, but that we have access to everyone. And the problem is sometimes that it's not that profitable to roll out this connectivity in some rural areas or in some remote territories. And that's what we want to change. We want to make sure that we close the digital divide and that we include everyone. Anywhere you are, you should be able to have access to the internet at fast speed, because this is also the key for you to work, to be integrated, to enjoy also some leisure, and make sure that you are fully part of this digital transformation. This is also important for businesses. That's why we want to put emphasis on connectivity and do more to make sure that everyone can reach some modern, efficient, and future-proof network for everything you want to do. And that's what we call this gigabit connectivity for innovative applications, but also for remote work and study and online government services. So of course, it will not happen just by itself. That's why we have put forward initiatives in terms of funding support from the EU, the Connecting Europe facility, 1.6 billion to fund these projects. And it's already happening, from 5G networks to transport and energy to submarine cable to connect EU to our international partners. And of course, here we count also on the role of member states in bridging this digital gap. Just one example in terms of connectivity, the ELA-Link cable. It's linking Europe to Brazil, to South America. And through this 6,000 kilometers of optical submarine cable, we have seen already tremendous improvement in terms of information exchange and opportunities to develop new businesses around this data, around this exchange of information through these connected cables. On semiconductors here as well, we've seen the problems, we've seen the disruption, we've seen the problems for our industry. And we also see that the global demand is continuing to increase. So what are we doing? We have put forward this CHIPS Act. The idea is really that the EU will produce also in Europe low energy, with low energy footprint, these chips that we need. We will also reinforce our leadership in research and technology. Europe is actually leading through 3 world-class research centers, notably the research on chips, on microelectronics. But we need to use this leadership to also develop more innovation, more production at home. And that's what we will do. We will also try to address the skills shortage and making sure that we understand better the global semiconductor supply chain so that when there is shortage, we can act swiftly. And we are discussing this actually with our colleagues in the United States and in Japan, for instance. A few examples of what the EU is doing to support also this. In addition to the CHIPS Act, we have launched an important project of common European interest on microelectronics. It's really with the member states at heart, 32 companies, and we hope here to have really investments in innovative projects and research. But we also have funding directly from the EU with this key digital technologies joint undertaking. I think it will be renamed the CHIPS joint undertaking. And here as well, we develop research and innovation. We have also worked with industries through the Alliance on Processor and Semiconductor Technologies, which helps us identify gaps and also making sure that we design the right kind of support that is needed across the EU. So quite a bit we are doing, but a lot of efforts if we want really to double our production. Now zooming in on also climate neutral, highly secure edge nodes. We should realize the challenge. Here again, Europe is a bit behind in terms of cloud, for instance. 90% of the EU's data is managed by US companies. You may say it's not such a problem, maybe not, but at the same time, if you see how data is important, maybe there is something wrong here in the EU's inability to expand in this growing area. We also have less than 4% of the top online platforms. So clearly the EU missed the social media revolution, despite a lot of advantage and despite the fact that we have users and consumers on this. Very often, the top online platforms are even more powerful in the EU than they are in the US. So here as well, we need to do something. We need to improve our capabilities. And we want to make sure that we anticipate the next revolution, making sure that we have also there optical and optimal coverage across the EU, including in less populated area, through this edge cloud I was describing a bit earlier, making sure that the computer is much closer to you in the network so that you have more reliance, it's less risky, but also it's faster to access applications. And that's very important for instance, the Internet of Things, for the digitalization of our industry, but also for the metaverse and augmented reality, for instance, that requires really this very fast reaction. Those of you who play game online can really see what I'm talking about. So through this, we want to make sure that we anticipate, we gain more market shares in this area, but also that we do some infrastructure that are better for the environment, climate neutral, highly energy efficient and sustainable edge nodes. That's what our credential for 2030, and we are starting to build them here as well, with a lot of support for creating a pan-European single market for data, making sure that here as well there is the possibility to share across EU boundaries in a trusted environment. And this is also good for business to reach the scale we need in this industry, but also making sure that we work there as well for this industrial data edge and cloud. And we have also there an alliance that is helping us, making sure that EU have more autonomy in cloud services, and that we have also concrete investment areas. And the Digital Europe program is there to help this. The reuse of public sector data is essential, but we want also to make sure that we give, for instance, easier access to cancer image. Fighting cancer is a challenge for the EU and for the world. We also want to really use the rich cultural heritage of Europe. I mean, we have more museums in the EU than anywhere in the world. We have more wealth in terms of cultural painting, resources, monuments that we can really use for the metaverse, for instance, but for new products in culture and the like, for tourism. And we were all, of course, to fund this common data space that will be used then for companies to build this innovation that we want. On quantum, that is one of these challenges. We want also there, this is really the future of computing, and we want to make sure that by 2025 already, so in a few years' time, we have already the first element of this quantum computer that allow complex simulations, but also that we want to make sure it's for good again, linking to our values, that we use cases in health or in logistics, in molecular biology, for instance, areas where we need this computing power to reach new applications. We also want to make sure that this quantum research is based on important elements and therefore that we link up with our industrial basis. And that's where, again, the EU is acting. Quantum technologies flagship is something we've launched. We want to have development in simulation, in communication, and also having this new computer on the ground over the next period. Euro HPC is our vehicle for investment in that context. We want to make sure that also there we join force, we pool efforts. As I was saying, in terms of supercomputer, we've done a lot, but we want to make sure that we also are at the forefront of connectivity that is also safe and secure, because it is encrypted through quantum computers. And here as well, we hope that through these elements, we will have an impact in terms of the EU footprint in the digital sector. So I mentioned already these new ways of doing cloud, but also connectivity can be done in a way that is smarter, that can reduce also the efforts for transport. And we want to make sure also that we have, for chips, ultra low power microchips, important because we will have millions of them. So if they consume less, we will have a very big development, reducing energy consumption. And similar thing, we want to use green and digital to also develop models that will reduce the impact on the environment. And that's what also HPC can do by having this digital twin of the Earth, predict extreme weather events, look at the opportunities for agriculture, and making sure that we also monitor what we are doing in terms of benefits from our policies. So I'm reaching the end of my presentation. I just wanted to flag that the digital decade is not just something that happens in Brussels. As I said, it's something that member states are contributing to. but it's also that you, as individual, can contribute to through the Digital Decade Futurium community. We have a webinar coming up soon on data sovereignty, but we have regular posting and resources that you can find online. So don't hesitate to follow us. Digital EU is our channel, and you will find lots of information complementing what I was presenting. And that's everything I wanted to say for now. Thank you. Maybe there are questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Thibaut. And indeed, that's a very, very good point, because there are indeed questions from the audience in general on how they can contribute best to the ongoing discussions on the digital topics that we have. And as you mentioned, the landscape is changing quite quickly. And even though we do look at the programs each year or once every 2 years, we still need the voice of the audience or the voice of people which are actually involved in there be heard. And one of the best places for now is indeed Futurium. And over there, you can find highly relevant topics which are debated, and a highly relevant community as well, which is active, which has very strong and technical opinions as well. And I suggest everyone to join Futurium and go into your own specific topic, and please contribute over there as well, because we need to hear voices to guide not only policy, but also maybe future events which could be relevant for you. So we better align ourselves with what we are doing with what you actually require. I'm going to actually put in the chat as well links to Futurium. And in the meanwhile, I will try and take your questions. Some of them are rather technical. So I would advise, in our speaker of today would not be able to answer also in a very technical way, then I would suggest everyone to use those questions in the specific topics which we have on this week. But we also have general questions as well, if I can call it like that, and I'll try and take them one by one, and Thibaut will try and provide some context or some better in-depth knowledge on them. First one would be if anything changed since those first concrete targets were written. Thibaut.
So the targets were really picked, I would say, on the basis of some research we've done, and it was very strongly building up on what we call DAISY. So it's a series of digital indicators that Europe has collected for the past 8 to 10 years or so, to really analyze what is happening in the digital sector, and also to look at how member states individually are doing in terms of this digital economy, digital transformation. So we had this as a basis, I would say, for indicators. And we picked a few. We couldn't have too many indicators in our digital compass, because otherwise it would not have been very readable, nor very effective as targets. And what we tried to do was to pick areas where we felt that they represented really a key element to evaluate progress. So for instance, connectivity we thought was extremely important because of its horizontal nature, but we also picked this quantum computing indicator because we thought this was also a signal of how Europe, in terms of research and in terms of cutting edge infrastructure, was doing. So there I can tell you that, of course, we continue monitoring all these elements. We believe that our compass is quite robust, precisely because it is a subset of elements, and it's not trying to basically include all the fine grain of all economic indicators. But by now, we also see that we need to be quite active in some front. You know, on connectivity, for instance, the COVID was not so good because it was a bit of a slowdown in terms of deployment of networks. There as well, you know, shortages of people and so on were an issue. On skills as well, we see that we need to change the trajectory. We need to have more and more people learning these skills. And so far, it's more a kind of a flat growth, you know. So I think that by every day, you know, the target is becoming more and more ambitious. 20 million experts, unless we act already now to produce really through the schools, through the universities, these experts through retraining. So that's, I would say that what we see is that by and large, the targets are right, but they become more difficult on some areas if we are not acting very, very fast to make progress.
Yeah, definitely. And especially because it is an issue of today that we kind of surround ourselves in a, let's call it a bubble. And I think having targets such as DESI or overviews such as what DESI provides takes us a bit out of that bubble and provides a lot more a clear overview of what is happening on ground and enables us to take decisions. And we actually had questions, a highly related question to this. Which technologies or areas you see are lagging behind the most in their targets? This is coming from that.
So there maybe it's good to go back a bit to the area. So in terms of targets, we have in the compass, you know, these four big categories, where today I would say that the most challenging is it's difficult to say which one it is really, because we have it's just the beginning. We have still a few years ahead.
Mm-hmm.
But nevertheless, I think that today possibly semiconductors is the one area where, you know, the challenge is the greatest, because you know, the industry is moving fast, and that we see also in other regions of the world that there are investments planned. I mean, the US just made announcements with also their own CHIPS Act, within Japan, in South Korea, in China, huge programs of subsidization to produce also these semiconductors. So here as well, I think that we cannot waste any time. We have made this CHIPS Act proposal. It is on the table of member states and parliament. And my hope is that there will be a faster agreement to put the investment on the ground, because the more we wait, the more we lose ground on our target to double our share in the global production.
That's a very good point indeed. And we actually had a question or a related question on this as well. If others outside of the EU are following the same principle in the digital compass, as we are all highly connected, I think some of the principles actually do apply to people, or not people, but entities outside of Europe. But the question is, do you see anyone else following the same principles, or others having different subsets, which might be more better applied for them?
So I think the interest for the EU activities is very substantial. And I was myself not so long ago visiting Silicon Valley, and there I can tell you that if you talk to NGOs, to companies, they're extremely interested in what the EU is doing, because we have been able to spell it out. I mean, as I was explaining earlier, we have, you know, through this pyramid, we have a clear plan. We can explain where somehow our proposals are coming from. You know, what is the basis in terms of rights and principles? What is the basis in terms of legislation? Also in our legislative process, actually, we have a system where we make a proposal on the basis of some analysis, so it's fairly transparent. People can look at where, you know, it's coming from. And when it's discussed with member states, also if there are changes, these have to be explained. So overall, I think that globally we have really a lot of appeal, because countries can look at us and can get inspired because they see the menu. They can read and follow a little bit where we are coming from, what we are based upon, and why we are doing some proposals. So I think that's a strength of Europe, that somehow we are explaining maybe more than in other regions what we want to achieve and what is the model. So I think this is also giving us some traction. We see that in the US, even though they are not developing always legislation, that nevertheless there is progress in terms of the values also that are similar, not always exactly the same, because they give maybe more weight to a business initiative than we do in the EU. But nevertheless, there is a lot of commonalities. We see a lot of following coming also from South America. We have interactions there. In my role as a director in charge of international affairs, I can tell you that I've had very good conversations with countries like Brazil, Argentina, Mexico. They feel very strongly associated to us in terms of these values, and they are developing their digital economy, their digital governance, also being inspired from us. And that's also something we see with Japan and Southeast Asia in particular. There is a lot here as well that we are discussing with these regions, trying also to promote our legislative framework, our norms, our values, our standards to this region. They have differences, but I think that also there, they can fully appreciate the benefits of saying that technology is for the benefit of people. And I think that they also appreciate this angle of sustainability. So that's for sure something where, there is a lot of traction. I wouldn't also hide that some other countries, like maybe China or Russia, have expressed their different views on maybe our human-centered approach, even though they don't spell it like that. We believe that maybe they don't have the same role for democracy at the heart of the digital technology.
Indeed, spelling out things really is a help for everyone. As you can see, clarity in all type of large projects is highly appreciated. In terms of other countries, we also had a question if it is crucial to actually establish partnerships with like-minded countries, especially in South America, countries such as Brazil. And if you have any comment on the aspect.
Very much. I mean, in fact, I didn't mention it, but in our vision, in our strategy for the digital decade, an important message we had was to say that basically inside the EU and outside the EU is not really such a relevant difference for the digital transformation, because digital has no border, essentially. And we will not be influential internationally if we are not strong as EU internally. And similarly, if we want to be strong internally, we need also to deploy internationally our norms, making sure that we have global standards as much as possible, and that we share the same frameworks with our international partners. I think that's really essential for us. And that's why we are keen on developing partnerships. We have done so in the recent past. I mean, we have now a series of vehicles to cooperate internationally. We have the Trade and Technology Council with the US. We have digital partnerships in the making with Japan, with Singapore, with Korea. We have another Trade and Technology Council with India. But we have also there, plans for early next year, drawing a digital alliance also with Latin America and the Caribbeans. That's something that we are really keen upon. We believe that a partner like Brazil is essential. I mean, Brazil is a large country, very influential also in terms of the internet governance, in terms of digital norms. And we also believe that there is a lot of commonality in the way Brazil sees, rights, norms, and values. So very much, yes, we want to work with them and have more partners than people who dislike us internationally.
That's a good point. Thank you. Maybe we can bundle up a few questions into one as they are highly related to each other. We had a question on ensuring sustainability as opposed to making things obsolete regarding technology. And if you see um, any change if we were to do benchmarks of these targets midway, so in 2025. So if there's anything you can comment on how we approach sustainability as opposed to making things obsolete,
Yes.
and on the benchmarks we do from year to year or once every 2 years.
So maybe I'll start with the second question, because yes, indeed, as part of our digital policy program, which is the legal legislative framework to achieve basically these targets and to set them, we've already announced that we will have indeed a kind of midterm review where we check if the standards are still relevant, if we need to add others. So definitely this will happen 2025 indeed. So that's something we have in mind. Just to make sure that we keep also there, the right objectives for the EU. And then in terms of sustainability, yes, I mean, this is, as I said, at the heart of the EU vision for the digital transformation. As I was explaining, for digital infrastructures, it is particularly important. So we want to make sure that, and it's proposal actually as well, we want to make sure that digital devices can also be recycled better, that can be reused, that it can be repaired. And this is a problem these days. It seems that you cannot repair your mobile phone, whereas these are high technology and very expensive products. So how come that you can repair your car, but you cannot repair your mobile phone? So we are now making proposals to facilitate this, to also improve the traceability of the components in the digital value chain, so that we can have also there the possibility to build really this important database and make sure that we optimize the life cycle of digital products and components.
Maybe to continue on a more larger scale, because you did mention as well multi-country projects. We have a question if there is a specific project that caught your eye, which is doing highly well in terms of sustainability, and as well, which traction do the multi-country projects have, and how are we involving significantly the industry in these projects on top of the existing or upcoming EU or RRF funds?
So that's really a very important point, because as I was saying, these targets, these digital infrastructures will not be built and delivered without very, very important investments. I mean, the investment gap we are talking about is in billions of euros. So it's really something that requires not just the effort of one country for 1 year, it requires the efforts of all of us over time. And therefore, we are trying to make sure that also there, in terms of the multi-country projects, we pool really EU funding together with national funding and private resources. I mean, that's really the key, we believe, to pool our efforts together so that we have the scale required, and also that we have efficiency in terms of these investments. So right now, where I see really good developments is the area, for instance, of pan-European 5G corridors. This is something that we are supporting through Connecting Europe facility, but also where it is meeting the interests of many member states, and some of them have used, in fact, the recovery and resilience facility funding, so these recovery plans, to precisely contribute to that. So I see really progress in that respect. I also see around high performance computing an acceleration of the procurement. So we were a bit slow last year. We had a delay on one of the supercomputer. I think now really the pace is back. and a lot of appetite from member states to invest because they also see clear benefits from using these supercomputers. In particular, during COVID times, we could do some simulation on some of the medicines. And this was really a tangible benefit from really all these collective efforts on high performance computing. So this is going well. And also there, we see on blockchain some very positive development. There is a lot of appetite for some member states and also a vibrant community around the EU. So we have really excellent researchers, and we see there as well opportunities for new applications based on blockchain technology. And I think that's something that we will hopefully see even more. So in the future, what we do is that we've developed as part of the Digital Decade policy program, something that we call the multi-country project, the MCP Accelerator. As part of the Commission, in my services, we have a team that is dedicated to really supporting the identification of this multi-country project, helping the member states to set them up through also the new vehicle we have, which is called the European Digital Infrastructure Consortium. So it's a new vehicle to facilitate the pooling of funding between some member states. So this MCP Accelerator is organizing workshops and making sure that we also launch by the end of the year a call for expression of interest so that industry and member states can flag where they see the biggest potential. So really here, I'm quite excited about opportunities, and I hope that we can use these multi-country projects really as a structural way to have this Team Europe dimension for the digital transformation.
Absolutely. Maybe a bit coming back to those connected communities, which you mentioned, we have some broader question, which maybe tie a bit with the skills section, actually, with which you previously mentioned, in the sense that if we have any signals from rural areas, and as well comment on the accessibility side from seniors, those that cannot read, which are also maybe lagging behind or are in a different point now in terms of connectivity. Is there anything which you might want to add on the skills part?
So as I was saying earlier, I think that skills is really basically the starting point, the heart of our competitiveness and of our ability to include people in this digital transformation. So it's really an essential element. At the same time, it's also one area where the EU is not really in the leading role. I mean, we have no real competence in education. It is something that is really in the art of what member states are doing in terms of schools, university, also in terms of professional education, retraining. So our policies are more trying to convene, these efforts. And we have launched actually a strategic plan on digital skills already in 2021, where we talk really with member states about how we can get inspiration from one region, from one country to the other, and making sure that we develop common policies, for instance, in terms of the school curriculum, that in the school curriculum, there should be always, digital skills included. In terms of how we approach precisely the elderly, there are ways to reach out to them, for instance, because they sometimes, they go to libraries that can be used to also provide digital skills. That was, for instance, something that Romania pioneered a few years back and has had a lot of success, but also because through the use of connected devices, the elderly also are learning every day more about digital technologies, and then can get the help of their family and from their government. So here, basically, we are not directly leading the front, but we have, as EU, really set some policies to help the member states to exchange information and to provide also support for this training. And that's an important element we will be monitoring every year to try to see who is doing well, who is doing less well, and to try also to be vocal if we see that a country is not doing enough, so that we make sure that they get a reminder and that we work together with them to also help out. Last point on skills, I wanted also to mention that through our program Digital Europe, we are putting 700 million, so basically 100 million per year over 7 years to develop high-tech digital skills. So we are sponsoring, for instance, the creation of new master's program across the EU, so that students and also professionals can get these advanced skills. And we believe this will be not the full solution, but nevertheless one of the elements to boost this number of very advanced skills in the EU.
Mm-hmm. And we're constantly working with the public to get better signals from them of what is working and what is not, so we can adapt those taken solutions. For maybe something quite specific, we have someone asking if access to e-signature should be considered a right for every EU national.
So that's a very pertinent point, because in fact, in our digital compass, this is one of the targets we have somehow, that, digital identity is something that should be granted to basically everyone. 80% of citizens should have a digital ID. And this digital ID is very often the key for a digital signature. In some countries, it is already established, but we believe that once you can be identified online, basically it's very easy to also get an electronic signature to sign documents. So that's really, in our view, the turning point. If it should be a right, it's difficult to say, because maybe people will still want to sign on paper as well. But strongly, what we are pursuing is that we want 100% of public services to be also online. And I think that through this mechanism, it certainly will enhance electronic signature.
I see. Maybe to start wrapping things up, maybe something about strategy and direction in general. We have quite a few comments which are mentioning more the principles behind sustainability and how maybe sustainability now is more of an afterthought, in the sense that we have so many directions, so many strategies on digital technologies, but maybe we would need others into how these digital technologies are used. So, for example, online purchasing, trade enabling, etc., which might be a second part of the challenge. Do you have anything to add on that comment?
I would actually challenge this impression. Maybe it's true that in what I was presenting today, there was a focus on the digital sector, the digital transformation itself, because this is essentially what DG Connect is doing. But we are also working very closely with other partners in other policy areas to make sure that digital technologies, digital infrastructures are also used for the benefit of sustainability. So, for instance, there is currently in preparation, if almost finalized, the idea of digitalization of the energy policy. I mean, this is really immense in terms of benefits. If you have sensors in homes, in cities, you can basically reduce the energy consumption very drastically thanks to these digital technologies. You can also optimize the electricity networks. Now that we have more and more renewables, one of the problems is that sometimes, there is a lot of sun, and therefore your solar power is coming, and at the same time there may be a lot of wind elsewhere, and therefore, how do you combine these various energy production, and how do you also combine them with other energy plants that use fossil fuels? This is something that digital technologies can help optimizing, making also the energy networks more resilient and more adaptable. So you see that's something we want to do. We want also to make sure that, for instance, at home this winter, you can use digital technologies to maybe minimize your own consumption of energy. So we are preparing also their efforts to make sure that you have maybe an app at home that tells you which are the machines that are consuming the most at a given moment. And how do you also yourself use the digital technologies to optimize your own energy consumption? So that's just an example, but it shows you that, in fact, we are working with colleagues, in energy, also in the transport sector, where we can also do a lot to be more sustainable. We are developing a data space, a green data space, here as well, to optimize recycling, to make sure that we have all the information to be more effective in terms of our policy making. So today I focus on the digital sector itself, but it doesn't mean that we are not involved together with other colleagues of the Commission and of member states and industry to make sure that digital is used also for sustainability and to reach these other targets.
And indeed, a very strong point indeed that for real change to happen, we must not only work at European level and institutional level, but also at city level and of course at individual level. We actually went through most of the audience question. Before I recap what happens in the following days, Thibaut, do you have anything to wrap up the session of today, or if you have any recommendation for our audience regarding the digital decade and the challenges ahead?
I mean, first of all, I think it's a good opportunity to look at this overall picture, because as I was explaining, I believe that Europe has a plan, and we want to make it also transparent to citizens, to people who live in Europe, who may not always know about what we are trying to do with this digital transformation. So I thank you also to inviting me today for this opening session. And I hope that those of you who are new to the topic will also bring this message forward and start discussions also in your home, in your family and friends around the table to try and discuss what is the European way to this digital transformation. Because I believe that we are bringing a more positive message. It's not about a dystopia we want to build. We want to build a future where digital technologies are there to help us, that are human-centered, and that are not a vehicle for basically non-democratic forces to exploit you and to monitor you. So that's something that I hope people will retain as well. And also this idea that we are putting a lot of efforts in becoming more autonomous in a way on some of these key infrastructures, and therefore that Europe really has a future in terms of the digital technologies. We are actually not lagging behind as much maybe as some people may think, and we have in our hands, I think, good tools to be really at the forefront of this digital transformation for our industry, but also for the benefit of regions, cities, and the people.
Excellent point. And it truly is an ongoing challenge that we really need to pay our attention on day to day. So thank you again, Thibaut, for providing this holistic view, this overview of the challenges. I want to also mention for those of you in the audience which might have had more specific questions that we did not take today. The one reason for this is that we have quite specific topics planned as well. So for example, on connectivity and gigabit coverage, we actually have a session today at 2 o'clock, which we invite you. And again, tomorrow on microchips and data, edge data computing. And for those of you interested on data centers, we have a session on Wednesday, as well as one on Web3. And Thursday on high performance computing and quantum, and as well on industrial platforms. And lastly, coming back to connectivity, we will have Friday a session on mobile generations. And we will close up again with EU digital infrastructure in a global ecosystem at the end of Friday at the end of the week. So thank you for those of you which participated today and engaged with us. Again, we invite you on Futurium to continue the discussion in the specific communities. And we gladly see each other at the following sessions in the autumn school. Thank you.